No, not really. I think everyone's very keen to hear how you approach this problem. So let's just dig into it.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Okay, cool. Great. See, it's being recorded. Wonderful. So, should we get in character and restart?
Let's go for it. You want to share a Google Doc on the screen?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much for asking. Is it all right? I actually would love to be able to share with you my thinking as I'm going through this. Would it be all right if I share my screen as I take notes here?
For sure.
Awesome. Cool. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. All right. So the question, as I understand it, is to design an app or design an application for people to meet other people to work out with.
Yeah.
Was that basically it?
Application solution to meet other people to work out with, or just keep each other accountable as you train.
Got it. Um, Let me start off by asking a few clarifying questions before we dive deeper. What like entity are we? Are we like a startup? Or are we part of like a larger company?
Well, you can say we are part of a larger company. So if we choose to do alliances down the line, that shouldn't be a problem.
Got it. And what sort of mandate has leadership given us in building this? Are we looking to build a profitable business right away? Are we prioritizing growth right now? Are we prioritizing strategic alignment with other parts of our business? What's our priority right now?
So since we're a large organization, we have multiple streams of revenue. So I think the first step would be to see if this is something viable, and driving revenue would be more of a long-term priority. So I think right now, just seeing if there's a market for this, getting user acquisition rates going. I think that's more what we're looking for.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like seeing if there's user growth, product market fit is our top goal, and in terms of what we're designing here.
That's right.
Cool. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. Can I take a minute to organize my thinking here?
Sure.
Awesome.
Can we zoom in on the doc? Yeah, no worries.
Is that better?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling it out. All right. So, the first thing I really want to do is focus on like potential sort of user personas. I think that we could really focus this toward because looking at the entire universe of anybody in the world who's working out is sort of would be hard to attack all at once. So I think that thinking about a specific kind of person working out is an important place to start and looking at who they are and what they need. So I've laid out a few different segments that we could choose to go into. I'm going to talk through them and then we'll from there we'll figure out which one of these to target. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So the first one is what I might call gym going heavy lifting meatheads. These are people that are pushing their deadlifts and their bench presses all the way to the max. Really trying to maybe for the purpose of bodybuilding or just for the purpose of pushing their fitness to the highest level. And when they're going to the gym, they, particularly in the case of something like a bench press or perhaps even a squat or something like that, really they having safety, somebody to spot them on the bench press would be really important. This might be something that folks like that might not be as readily willing to admit, but I think that some amount of companionship could be valuable to them, to having somebody there so they're not feeling, as alone perhaps during their time at the gym. And also like somebody to say, to push them for that additional challenges, to push their PRs to new heights. Another group that I think is a bit different is what I'll call New Year's resolutioners. These are people that feel, it's quite appropriate seeing as we're less than a year away from New Year's. These are people that want to go to the gym, want to get fit, but don't necessarily have the accountability or the social network to have that positive peer pressure to inspire them to want to actually go to the gym and to work out. The third segment, which through thinking about their needs is kind of similar to the gym going heavy lifting meatheads, is the long distance runners. These are folks that might really enjoy going on long runs, but it's possible that perhaps in some scenarios of folks living in cities or other places, they might not feel safe fully going on their own. So that's a different kind of safety. They also, sometimes might enjoy having the company, and then also, helping to keep them on pace and push them to new heights. So I think that their needs actually, I've listed them out, look pretty similar to the first one. Now that I've sort of laid these out, what I think I'll do next is. Oh, sorry. Did you say something?
Go ahead. This sounds good.
Okay, yeah, I thought I heard something. So what I might do here next is to think about for each of these segments, what is sort of the both size of each of these segments, as well as to what extent can we actually think that we can provide differentiated value beyond what's already there. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to label these reach, like how big of a reach is this to this size of the market overall, as well as the impact. And so I'm going to be making some pretty broad sweeping assumptions here. I recognize they might not be fully accurate, but hopefully for the purposes of this thought experiment here, we can sort of engage in a bit of suspension of disbelief. Does that sound good?
Yep, that's okay for now.
Awesome, cool. So from my perspective, I think the largest group would be the New Year's resolutioners. Particularly in the United States, I know that the United States is some extremely high percentage overweight and obese. Not to say that necessarily directly correlates to folks who don't engage in physical fitness, but it's sort of a common trope in society that I'll get to the gym next year, right? Like, and by February it doesn't happen. So I'm going to assume that is one of the largest categories. From my personal encounters with folks in fitness, as was mentioned previously, I was president of K-Fit during my time at Kellogg, and I personally am a CrossFit athlete, and so I engage with a lot of folks who are really into fitness. I feel like long distance runners are a fairly large group. And then beyond that, I would say the lowest reach would be the gym going heavy lifting meatheads. These might be the people taking up the most time on the bench press, but they are at the gym. But I feel like just relative to the other two, I feel like I hear about those less frequently in society. Now, in terms of how much of an ability we think that we could make to reach these people and actually deliver something to them that they wouldn't already have, I think so. In the case of long distance runners, I mean, what immediately comes to mind is Strava. And I feel like a lot of these folks are already using that. In fact, I've even heard stories about Strava being used for people to find romantic partners. So I feel like that is already, for these folks, a lot of their socialization and needs in the context of fitness are already being met there. So I think that we have a low ability to add really too much additional value to that beyond this sort of application that's more or less already gone viral and reached high penetration there.
That's fair.
Yeah, feel free to stop me at any point or challenge me on any of these assumptions. Like I said, we're engaging in a bit of suspension of disbelief here.
That's totally fine for now.
Cool. So in terms of the heavy lifting folks and the New Year's resolutioners, I think we actually have a chance to make a higher impact on the heavy lifters than the New Year's resolutioners. I think that the New Year's resolutioners, I think about the sort of Planet Fitness business model of trying to attract folks to sign up at a very low price and having extremely crowded January gyms, but then folks fall off. I think that at the end of the day, like I personally, or just speaking for myself, if I'm the one that's going to be leading this product, that's something that I don't personally have as strong of an understanding of. I think that we have more of an ability to impact and actually find and eventually engage and paying user base and folks that are really committed to their fitness. And I think there are really significant needs that they have in terms of safety. And as, like I said, they might not want to admit it, but I think that they're also looking for some companionship in going to the gym. So I actually think the highest impact that we can have is here. So with that said, the next thing I'm thinking is, okay, based on all these different things, which of these do we actually want to prioritize going after?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, does that sound good?
yeah, no, that sounds good. Just one question. You spoke
Yeah.
about market size, like the reach and the impact. Do you want to consider the willingness to pay for each of these personas now, or is that something we can evaluate once you start solutioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to do so if you'd like. Thinking about the sort of mandate that's been given to us from leadership, I actually was intentionally skipping over that a bit because the goal right now is for user growth. But happy to talk about willingness to pay if you'd like me to.
Yeah, just very quickly.
Sure. Cool. So I would say the New Year's resolutions. I think in the long term, that like that persona, I think would have a lower willingness to pay. And I think that the folks that are already committed to the folks that are sort of already committed to fitness, I think would have a higher willingness to pay. This is something they're already actually. I think that folks that are going to the gym show a stronger willingness to pay in the context of like they're actually paying for a gym membership. Long distance runners, maybe they are doing it for more like one of the reasons why they like that form of fitness is for a more cost conscious reason. The fact that they don't need to pay for a gym membership necessarily, they can run outdoors. So maybe not in Chicago in the winter, but perhaps in other geographies. So I'm actually going to put their willingness to pay slightly lower.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Any other characteristics that we should keep in mind here before choosing which segment to go after?
I think we're good to choose a segment now.
Cool. Awesome. Um, so I know that the sort of mandate from leadership is, like grow the user base, get it big, see if there's product market fit. And so based on that, we might be inclined to go after the New Year's resolutioners. However, like I was sort of alluding to this earlier, I think that in terms of the ability for us to turn New Year's resolutioners into sort of a longer term platform on which folks can sort of engage and meet people to work out with in the long term, I'm inclined to say that actually the heavy lifting folks might actually be a better segment for us to target. How does that sound?
That sounds fair. Let's go with that.
Cool. All right. So what I'm thinking of doing next is going to brainstorming some different feature ideas and then prioritizing between those and deciding what is going to be our sort of first killer feature that will attract these heavy lifting folks to our app. Is it all right if I take a couple minutes to organize my thoughts?
Sure, go ahead.
Cool. All right. Cool. So I brainstormed a few different features about how we can go here. I think that all of them have some amount of promise, but what I'd like to talk through here is the ways in which these features meet the needs that we've laid out for our user segment, as well as a very high level estimate of the effort that I would imagine it would take for us to go out and to actually implement these features. So just to talk about the features first, one is sort of I'm imagining this almost to being like the most MVP version of this. And so imagine like the absolute bare bones would be something like a Google form that gets sent out to folks, to say like, hey, looking for a gym buddy, like enter the lifts that you enjoy doing and what your PRs are here, and we'll find somebody in your area. PR stands for personal record. And we'll find somebody with similar interests in lifts as well as your PRs, so that you can go to the gym with them and meet particularly the companionship and safety needs. Not to say that additional challenge isn't a need that's met there, but I think that the fact it's focused on like PR lifts indicates that okay, this is somebody who can pick up the bar off of you in case you're struggling to get up off of the bench press. So that's why I describe this effort as low. I think that's sort of a most MVP version of this. A little bit more ramped up version of this would be something like Tinder or Bumble BFF, where you get to go through folks and who like a stack of cards of folks maybe in your area that are working out and are looking for buddies, and you can sort of go through them and say, okay, yeah, this looks like a buddy that I want to be with, or no, this person doesn't seem like the person I'd want to work out with. And I think it's more focused on companionship, but it is a little bit higher fidelity, perhaps in the form of a mobile app, which is why I put the effort as medium. And the final thing that I think would be really interesting is having whatever application we ultimately build be eventually go and host regional lifting competitions. I think that that positive peer pressure of being around others and really putting your tests to the limit, I think can really push folks physically and psychologically to where they need to go to get to those next levels. With that said, that's I assume we're working for a tech company. That's a very analog and local thing to do, and so I think that would be quite high effort. So that might be something that we bring in later in the roadmap. So overall, oh yeah,
Sorry, Ben, because
oh yeah, go ahead.
that's because that may just involve setting up events and marketing them and so on and so forth and advertising them through the app.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming we're coming from like a technology company, and so that's something that is really, really like offline and not necessarily in our wheelhouse. Whereas building something more software based is more low hanging fruit.
Got it. Makes sense.
So I already have a pretty strong idea, but what I'm thinking of doing next is to sort of like describe in a little bit more detail how we might go about this, how we would prioritize between these, and sort of what our next steps are. Does that sound good?
I would love to understand that.
Yeah. Awesome. So I basically already alluded to this in my description of talking through these, but I think that starting off with something where we really focus on like, hey, you need a gym buddy. I think that a lot of people who go to the gym are they see other people around, but it's a little bit awkward or intimidating to go up and try to become buddies with them. And so I think maybe we start off with going on to like fitness forums. Here, why don't I actually just write this out? So I think we'll be starting out with that feature, but I think that the go to market strategy is really key to like getting the word out about it, because it's so important to have network effects, because an application on itself is completely not valuable unless if there is a sizable user base on it. So some of the things in our go-to-market strategy to get this MVP version out, which is like pairing up partners based on PR lists, is basically to go out to like fitness forums, whether it's on Reddit or Men's Health or Women's Health or whatever it may be, to promote this. I think that going to perhaps like trade organizations, or to something like there's like Rogue like strongman events. Rogue is a fitness brand that makes a lot of things like barbells and apparel, and for particularly folks who do CrossFit or strongman competitions, those are the kinds of place that we would go and would encourage folks, because a lot of the people that go to those enjoy going to the gym, and those kinds of things would be like those are sort of like top of the line. I think also going directly to gyms, figuring out like whether they're local gyms or they're chains like 24-hour fitness, going to those and saying like, hey, this is a service. We come, just like you plug right in, you promote this to your members, at no additional cost to you. You are creating, doing the work of creating a community within your gym that will keep people coming back, and also importantly, will keep them safe. From there, I think that if we can see traction from a sort of MVP version of it, then we could build. So actually, So I think maybe directly gyms would be first, and this would sort of be the strategy we go. And as we go to a more national marketing and go-to-market strategy, then we could build a higher and higher fidelity version of our app.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you so much, Min. One additional question for this feature that we will build. What do you think will be our initial North Star metric given the requirements from leadership and so on?
Got it. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the number one North Star metric will just be like some combination of user adoption and user retention, right? And so now that I say that out loud, I guess a question that we'll need to answer is, okay, user adoption. Users go and then they find a buddy to work out with, right? So that's that might be what we're focused on first, but then shortly thereafter, there might be a question of how do we retain users? What do we do to keep them on the app? Because if it's just matchmaking, then then they could very well drop off of it, right? Like that's the theory of dating apps, at least. It's kind of similar to that. In theory, they drop off eventually. So I think. At first, so I think that right now where we're at, like user adoption rate, like number of new users per month or something like that, will be most important. Eventually, I could see that transitioning to user retention, and or user like payment conversion. I could see this longer term turning into some sort of freemium model, where maybe a more premium version gets you access to like fitness routines. Or access premium, like priority access to new apparel and diet supplements and things like that. So I think that our North Star metric might change over time, but to directly answer your question, I think that right now probably just user acquisition is our number one North Star metric.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And scene.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you. This was, I think this was very quick and very fast. So we're open to taking questions now. For those in class, you can just raise your hand and I can take one out and you can ask your question. For those on Zoom, I would encourage you to write your question on the chat, and I'll probably read those out aloud to Ben. Any questions? Okay, I see one in class.
Any specific reasons you did not include any benchmark part in your case, or any user testing, or I don't know, do you think you should use that kind of tool or not?
So just to repeat the question, is there a reason Ben did not include any benchmarking or user testing metrics like A/B tests and so on?
Yeah.
As a step.
As a step. Okay.
Yeah. User testing, you're absolutely right. That would have been something good for me to do. I certainly could have said something when I was ideating features right here. I could have said, yeah, like I'm sort of making my assumptions here. The way that I would validate my assumption, or even going back to talking about segment needs, the way that I would validate my assumptions would be to go out and to actually interview customers and to do user research. And so you're absolutely right. That's something that I could have done a better job of. Like I said, this wasn't perfect. There were some things that I think I did well. There were some things I think I could have done differently. Your other question, could you elaborate more on what you mean by benchmarking?
I don't see like any competitor analysis when you think about
Mm.
like how are these people solving the problem today when you're thinking about solving that problem. Would you add that or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, you know, for these cases in general, like the interview isn't meant to understand like how knowledgeable are you about the fitness industry. So I guess I could have, like, with that said, I could have, couched some of my assumptions and saying, oh, okay, this is what I assume. With that said, I did explicitly mention long distance runners, that I knew that Strava was a readily available alternative. I sort of did talk about like I did talk about like Planet Fitness as sort of like meeting New Year's resolutioners' needs in terms of getting like the low $10 a month sign up cost. I definitely didn't explicitly say, okay, now we're going to take a minute to look at competitors. I suppose I could have done more of that, but I think that I also and think I'm proud that I really, really focused on the user and like what are the user needs? How do we meet them? And I think that is more important than overly fixating on competitors.
Got it. There are a couple of questions on the chat that I'll just read for the audience here. Ben, do you usually show your notes like this with the interviewer, or do you just have those on your own screen to structure your thoughts?
Yeah. So first off, full disclosure, I haven't actually been formally interviewed since I was in Kellogg. I've been at Google since Kellogg. So in terms of what I usually do, this is going back to 3 years ago. What I can say is I would definitely I would like, this is just an absolute hack. I would 100% recommend for anybody who feels comfortable doing so. Basically, all interviews are virtual nowadays. When I originally learned to interview in undergrad, when I was going into consulting, and for anybody who's done that, it's done in person consulting. Like, the way you're coached to do that is you take notes, you write out your framework, and then you're supposed to like turn the paper around and then like walk your interviewer through each of your steps of thinking. Now that all interviews are virtual, I think it is incredibly hard to solely verbally communicate things. And having a shared set of understanding to refer to is super valuable for communicating to the other person and forcing yourself to stay organized, right? Like, when I created this table of like segment and need, it was very clear that I was going to be fully assessing and comparing each of these things. And it forced me to stay on track for each of those. So some people, when I've recommended this to people in the past, some people try it and they're just like, I can't do it. I can't talk and type at the same time. It's just not possible. I need to do it on a pen and paper. I know I can't. I'm like, that's fine. At the end of the day, you all should figure out what works best for you. But if you are able to, I personally think that this can be really impactful. And if I were conducting an interview, I would love it if the people I were interviewing were to do this to help me follow along.
Any questions in the room? Okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much to share your experience here. I also come from consulting background, and usually we present the framework. We present like everything that we would like to analyze before start doing an analysis. Here, when you ask it some time to start preparing your thinking, you went to potential segments and you started like brainstorming already, like what would you like to cover. That was supposed to be like, and then you go through the next steps, like, because it seems to be a little different from consulting cases.
Yeah.
So it was,
yeah. Product cases are different from consulting cases. Like, consulting, like, everybody knows, like, Victor Chang, case in point, right? There's a very precise way you must do it. And sometimes you have to ask the exact right question to unlock the next step. You're like, do you have a like demand curve you could show me? And an interview says, yes, in fact, I do. Here is exhibit A. Like, that is not how product cases are. Like, product cases are open-ended, interviewee-led. And so the way that I did today is not the end-all be-all of how to do interviews, right? Like, I hope that folks aren't coming away being like, wow, the way that Ben conducted that interview is the one way, right? To the earlier comment. If somebody else felt like a really important way to answer the question of how to build a fitness app is to dive deeper into a competitive analysis, that's fantastic. do a great job of communicating that and make that really clear to your interviewer why a competitive analysis is so important and how that's informing how you're going to build a great product for your users. And to the person who just asked the question, if you feel most comfortable and feel like you can best convey your thinking by laying out the entirety of the framework and then walking through that, then that's great, you know, but also be ready to respond to your interviewer, right? One thing in hindsight that I actually think I did a poor job in this interview was I spent a long time rambling, and a couple of times Shashank had to jump in and to interrupt me. In my own defense, it's a lot harder with Shashank being such a small dot on the screen, and I can't actually see his facial expressions and sort of have that back and forth with him. So I kind of got into my own zone here, but be responsive to your interviewer, right? If you're laying out a framework for 4 minutes and the interviewer is sort of twiddling, making it apparent that they want you to keep going, then, you know, engage with the interview. It's really meant to be a conversation, open-ended, interviewee led. And what you should be thinking about is how can I do what I need to effectively convey my thinking about how to build a great product for these users.
I think that's good advice. I think similar to consulting, I think 2 to 3 minutes is really 2 to 3 minutes is about it. Anything more is, yeah, you can't be silent for that long in an interview, right? And I think that's why it helps to show your screen, because at least if you're not speaking, what are you doing instead, right? Another question from the chat, Ben. Given that the prompt asked about designing an app, at what point do we normally end the case in such scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't know. There's no one answer to it, you know? I'm thinking about, let's see, I'm thinking about the interviews that I've conducted where, I ask about like, you know, design an application. It's like associated with restaurants, right? And like, I think that, I don't know. I think it's the phrase that comes to mind is like, I think one time somebody asked, or Abraham Lincoln once said like, how long are a man's legs? Like long enough to reach the ground, right? It's like how long does it need to be? Like how long do you need to go? It's like long enough to reach the ground, long enough to have your interviewer feel like you have successfully demonstrated the skills that they are looking for, which are, you know, to show that you understand the customer, you understand you know, how to meet their needs, you understand how to engage in prioritization, you understand you know, how a particular product is strategically positioned to other things in the market, you understand how to use metrics to inform your decision, user research to inform your decision. Those are the things that you need to show. So I don't think I can say like a definitive answer on, you know, what is the end point. I think like that's kind of for the interviewer to decide, right? Sometimes interviews could take the entire, you know, if you have a 45-minute interview, it could be one case for 40 minutes. Other times it could literally be I know I'm rambling, but if you'll indulge me, I'll go on one other tangent. There was one interview I was in during my time at Kellogg, and you know, it was like maybe the second or third question that I got asked in that. It was like, it was basically like the most simple product management question there is. It's like, what's your favorite app and why? And so I talked about like actually, ironically, a fitness app that I use that I like. And they said, how would you make it better? And I taught, and just like from reading, like that question of how would you make it better could be a 20, 30, 40-minute question. In this case, I just I actually was physically in the room with the interviewer, and I guess I picked up on the sense that it was a very quick thing. So I described like one specific pain point that I had and how they could make it better with more like surprise and delight. I actually had a chance to debrief with that interviewer afterwards after I'd gotten the job, and they said like we just wanted to see like, did you understand surprise and delight? Like that was the one gap that we were looking for. And in that short answer to that question that took probably no more than, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, I demonstrated that skill. So how long should a man's legs be? Long enough to reach the ground.
So then a follow-up question, Ben, then when you conduct interviews at Google, right? Is the aim that you finish the question, or is it however far the interviewee can take it because it's interviewee led? Now I know that varies from company to company, but what are some best practices at Google for that?
Yeah. So one thing I should clarify, I should have clarified this early on. I am doing this in my capacity as an individual and as a Kellogg alum. I'm joining from my personal account to my personal computer. This is not a Google sanctioned event. So I definitely should have caveated that ahead of time. Like nothing I'm saying here should be interpreted as the statements of Google as a corporation. let's see. So with that caveat out of the way, what I personally say when I'm conducting interviews is I tell the interviewee, it is your responsibility to answer the questions, and it's my responsibility to keep us on time. And so I say, like, hey, there might be some times that I jump in and steer you in a different direction and ask you clarifying questions. That isn't to say you're doing a poor job. It's just that I need to keep us on time. So I think one thing I could have done a better job at, and I did it a couple of points, was to say, hey, so this is what I've done. I'm thinking of doing this next. How does that sound? And leaving a pause for the interviewer to guide me and keep me on track and on time. So I'd say, like, if there's one thing I definitely wish I did more of, it was pausing and checking in, saying, I want to do this next. What do you think? The other thing I'll mention is there are a couple times, Shashank, you jumped, like, I sort of ended on a period, so to speak. And then you had to jump in and said, okay, do this next. I didn't even have a hypothesis as to where to go next. So I'd say, don't stop and say, okay, I'm done. What should I do next? Say, oh, okay, I just evaluated these segments. Do you think I should size the markets? Right? Have a hypothesis as to where you want to go next. Open that question to the interviewer and let them guide you to keep you on time.
Questions in the room yet?
How important do you think it is to have more of a moonshot feature idea and something that's kind of pushing the boundary of showing that you have some knowledge around what tech is currently capable of or where technology trends are going? How important do you think in an interview?
Yeah. So speaking for Google specifically, Google does look for, and I would imagine any other tech company would look for, interest in and knowledge of technology and technology trends. So, I did not have the opportunity to drop any AI buzzwords into this. That may have been showing some of my personal bias in terms of the skeptic, in terms of the solution seeking a problem. I would much rather see folks focus really on the user needs and figure out how to meet the user needs as opposed to trying to shoehorn in a technology that doesn't necessarily genuinely meet the need. With that said, what I did try to do was I did try to show some of my technological understanding to say hey, let's talk about a really low fidelity MVP of more or less the Google form where people can say what kind of lists they like to do, and then go higher fidelity to a mobile app, and then this is something that's outside the capabilities of a typical tech company. So I think if it's, I would say, any case should show some amount of consideration of what is the theoretical technological efforts that'll go into it, with the understanding that there's no way to genuinely know the answer to that without actually understanding the details. And if you have the opportunity to shoehorn the latest, AI model XYZ, whatever, new whatever has been the latest in the news, I think that's great. I'm less inclined to think of that as being particularly valuable, but there may be other companies or interviewers that think that that's more valuable.
Great. Another question from chat. Ben, why do you not choose the New Year's resolutioners segment, considering their reach is highest and our goal is to maximize customer acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked this. And I very deliberately did not choose New Year's resolutioners. I was almost tempted. One of my pet peeves is when people look at customer segments and they say, this one's the largest and we're going to go after it because it's the largest. That is not a good reason to choose a segment. People do this all the time internally at Google, partially because Google is always thinking about scale and because Google assumes they can win in any segment that it goes into, which is true in some capacities, definitely not others. But size of market does not mean that you actually have the ability to build a product that meets user needs in a way that it is not met otherwise, right? And if you just focus on going after the largest segment, then there's a chance you're going to end up building a product. It's like what they say, if you try being everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. And so I thought that the New Year's resolutioners, while there are a lot of them out there, I did not see a world in which we would get a long-term, committed, engaged user base, and that we would be able to build an app that could provide differentiated value beyond what is already out there of all the different fitness brands that are trying to take advantage of the January 1st New Year's resolution. This is going to be the year I'm gonna go to the gym. So yeah, hopefully that and so largest segment and grow just because the segment is large doesn't mean that we should grow that would meet our need meet the goal of customer acquisition, right? If that's the case, then I should say our segment is humans, right? That's 8 billion people big. Then we should just have our segment be humans.
Questions in the room? Yeah.
Yeah, just curious, have you ever come across a situation that the interviewer actually challenged your choice on whatever the features or user segmentation, how you tackle that, or you like stick on your own opinion, or you're taking the advice for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Did that come through? Okay, I guess it did.
Yes, I got that. Yeah, basically, like if an interviewer challenges you on one of your assumptions, then how do you respond? This is something that I it's hard for me to say what I do because it's been quite a long time since I've actually interviewed myself. But when I conduct interviews, sometimes I will challenge assumptions because I think they are wrong. Sometimes I will challenge assumptions because I think they are interesting and I want to see how the interviewer, not necessarily wrong, but interesting. And I want to see how the interviewee responds to being challenged in terms of do they fold right away or do they stand by their assumption and back it up? And so there is definitely no silver bullet in terms of should you back it up or should you should you change your perspective. I think you have to really evaluate it from first principles, right? Like, let's say, I don't know, Shashank had said something like, are you sure that there's no opportunity out there for a New Year's resolution? Like, are you sure that's only medium impact there? Like, I think that people really genuinely do want to go to the gym. Like, are you saying that we have no way to meet those people's needs? And then I could either say something else. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm being too dismissive of New Year's resolutioners. Like, actually, you're right. I think that there is a big opportunity there. People genuinely do want to go to the gym, and I think that I'm being overly dismissive there. Or I could back it up and say, you know what? Like people have been trying over and over again. This is clearly a problem that people have tried to solve in the form of academic research and in the form of fitness brands and things like that. And so I think that it's just a really saturated market in our ability. I'm standing by my medium assessment because I think that there's just I'm a bit from my own personal biases and experience in the world. I think that we do not have a strong opportunity to make a high impact on this segment, right? It could go either one of those directions, right? And so it's really just a matter of like using your own intuition to figure out what is the right thing to do.
Awesome. Any other questions? Okay.
I remember the original question was something like design app in which workout buddies can keep each other accountable. And when I heard that story, I thought it's already a really specific question. It was difficult for me to come up with like 3 segments. But what you did was you sort of opened the question up, right, to include, because I would think that the heavy lifting meatheads don't need to keep each other accountable because they have been keeping themselves accountable for many years. So I just wonder what you think about that, because sometimes the questions could be really narrow.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess this question. So full disclosure to sort of pull back the curtain on this. Or Shashank and I did have a chance to talk beforehand, so I can't put this solely on him in terms of what the question was. So I think in hindsight, maybe Shashank, our question should have been something a little more open ended, like design a solution for people to find ways to work out with other people, right? Like that keep accountable is like already getting into user needs. So I think we could slightly modify that. With that said, I think that if you do want to open up a question or bring in new considerations that perhaps didn't otherwise, and you feel like it goes beyond the original intent of the question, then either ask those in the series of clarifying questions up front. You're like, hey, you mentioned that it's meant to keep people accountable. Like, would it be all right if I just sort of more generally think about like how people can socialize and meet each other in the context of fitness? I'd assume that I think it would be pretty peculiar if the interview was like, no, you must focus on the need of accountability. But so you could do that. But like it's very interviewee led. So don't feel like you have to be kept precisely in a box. If you fear that you're stepping outside of that box, check in with your interviewer, state your assumption, acknowledge your shortcomings, right? Like several times I said, this is all based on my general understanding of, being an individual who engages in fitness. And I mentioned I'm a CrossFit athlete, and I knew that Rogue does strongman competitions, so couch everything with the appropriate assumptions. But ultimately, couch things with the appropriate assumptions, check them with your interviewer, and they will make sure you stay on track.
Thank you.
So one thing you can also do is like ask. So you get at least like 2-3 clarifying questions up front. So that's your chance to open it up a little bit to make it easier on yourself. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. This was super helpful. Quick question. I think you also mentioned like the lifters and the runners have really similar needs. So when you get to there and you recognize that multiple segments have similar needs, do you ever kind of like design a thing for multiple segments, or would you always stick to one?
Okay, so one thing about these segments is I really like creating very like visceral, catchy segments. Yeah, hopefully you all notice that. I hope that Meatheads isn't like it. Now that I look back, and I hope that Meatheads isn't like an insensitive name, but I find it to be, when I'm conducting interviews and folks are like, oh, let's think about whether to target like young, middle-aged, or old people. I'm like, it's just not interesting. There is no law of the land that says that your customer segments need to be MECE, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. With that said, I think that talking about targeting multiple segments is generally misguided. If anybody's taken marketing so far, like in marketing class, I remember Kent Grayson was very particular about like, you must target one segment and one segment only. And so at the very least, from a sort of marketing academic perspective, you target one segment. I think that you could, if at the end you're like, hey, you know what? Actually, this application that we built, like maybe a future growth strategy could be to bring it to long distance runners. However, pragmatically, what you then saw was that like, while the features might be similar for meatheads and for long distance runners, the go to market strategy is entirely different, because those are two completely different sets of people. And so I think that like, if I had said, you know what, I'm going to build a segment for both of those, then when I was thinking about go to market strategy, I would have had two totally different things, right? I mean, do you go to Rogue strongman competitions, or do you go to your local Fleet Feet, or like to the Chicago Marathon? Those are two totally different places to go. So I would generally recommend stick with one segment.
Couple of last questions. Okay, one more.
Always do a go-to-market strategy, or are you including it because the metric is user acquisition?
I honestly, Shashank, I don't even know if we talked beforehand about me doing a go-to-market strategy. Just sort of naturally flowed out. I was like, hey, if we're like a startup and we're trying to get this product off the ground, then like we got to figure out how we're getting the word out. Like, this is not the kind of thing where if you build it, they will come. Like, and I explicitly stated like, one of the key features of this is the presence of other people on the application. And to do that, you need to get the word out. So it would have felt to me like a big gap if the go-to-market strategy hadn't been included.
Yeah, and it's something I think if you have time when you're doing your product design review, talking about metrics and go-to-market strategy just shows that you're thinking about those things. So it's just brownie points for you.
Well, you prompted me on North Star metric. I did not. So I missed that one.
Yeah. Any other questions? Chat looks good. Okay, in that case, then one more scan. Okay, Ben, thank you so much. This was very helpful. Can we please have a round of applause for Ben? I don't think I can show you all the people here, but it was definitely a full house at one point. So thank you so much for coming back every year and contributing to the Kellogg community.
Hey. Absolutely. Good luck. Find interview buddies. Interview with each other. Y'all are each other's best assets. So yeah, good luck. Also, business school is awesome. Like, I'm so jealous of y'all. Have the best time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Friday.